7 tips for surviving a grant drought. Welcome everyone. It's so great to see so many familiar faces and names. I'm so glad that you're here. I'm Dana Schuler-Drummond. I'm a grant professional and I will be leading this short webinar, probably about 30 minutes, on the current state of grant seeking. What are the causes of this current state? And then of course the main reason you're here is tips to survive and get through this time as a grant professional. Let's go ahead and get started. Surviving the grant drought. Here's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about the current state of grant seeking in 2025, the causes for just the way things are right now, why this really sucks for grant professionals. Hopefully we'll have some time that we can commiserate a little bit today. And then really the big thing that you're here for are those 7 key tips for surviving this drought. But before we get any further, this is the point where I pay the bills, and I want to introduce you to our sponsor, which is Grant Holster. Now, I have been in nonprofits over 35 years. I have been in grant seeking exclusively for about 17 years. When I first started doing grant seeking full time, I was relying on sticky notes and spreadsheets, notepads, all kinds of different systems to manage my grant seeking. That just became unmanageable after a while. So I did try to use some apps that were going to coordinate that effort. I quickly realized they needed a lot of workarounds and that they probably were not created by grant professionals who understood what grant professionals need. Now, Grant Holster, I've been using it for about 5 years, and it has taken my organization farther than I would have ever dreamed. In the last 5 years, we have been able to submit over $300 million in grant proposals across about 80 different clients, and there's about 8 or 9 different staff members and contractors who are doing that. So you can imagine all of the different, the hundreds and thousands of different pieces of information we are able to keep on hand in Grant Holster. Some of the things that I really love the most is not only am I able to manage all of my deadlines and sync everything with my calendar, but I'm also able to send out reminders to staff and to collaborators on different tasks that are coming due. And I can run reports in really just a few clicks, such as the report that told me I had done $300 million in proposals in the last 5 years. It only took me a couple of clicks to run that information. So a lot of benefits, and it has really been a game changer for my organization in seeking grants. Now, there is a special for this webinar. If you're watching this in September 2025, I've got good news for you. If you can go ahead and register for Grant Holster by the 15th and enter the code DROUGHT, DROUGHT, you'll get 20% off your first 12 months subscription, and we will help onboard all of your historic data. We'll help get all of that migrated, and we don't charge for doing that. So just reach out to Grant Holster and take advantage of this great opportunity. Now, let's get going. Again, like I said, we're going to talk about the current state of grant seeking first. Like I said, I have been in nonprofits for over 35 years, and I think right now we are in a perfect storm of situations that are making it very difficult to seek and secure grants. Yay! And in the comments, I would love for you to comment about what are some of the challenges related to grants that you are experiencing right now. Now, let's talk about the causes for this state. What has caused this perfect storm? Well, I really kind of see there's a couple of different categories of things. Some of the changes that we're seeing, or the barriers that we're seeing, they're not sudden. They've really been happening over a long period of time. However, they're all kind of converging right now. So let's talk through some of those. The first one is that the number of institutional funders, grantors, is not keeping pace with the number of nonprofits. So since 1970, the number of nonprofits has grown, at a growth factor of almost 10. So we have about 2 million nonprofit organizations in the United States right now. Compare that to the grantors, the private foundations, including, you also think about public grantors like cities, states, the federal government. We haven't had a whole lot of those that are new. And we've also, the number of foundations has not increased at the same rate as nonprofits. So there's a lot more competition. The rise of donor-advised funds. Now, donor-advised funds are the fastest growing mechanism for charitable giving right now. And I'm not going to talk a lot about what DAFs are, how they work, how to access them, because let's leave that for another webinar. But in short, DAFs are increasing exponentially, and they have been doing that for the last several years. Now, there are some issues with DAFs compared to traditional, maybe family or private foundations that give grants, is that they're harder to research. They are usually housed under the umbrella of another organization, like maybe a community foundation, and all of the financial information goes under that organization's 990, which sometimes you can't research the specific fund that you're looking for. Fund managers are a lot of times gatekeepers in terms of accessing information and connecting to the people who are making the funding decisions. Also, gifts can be anonymous if they come from a DAF. I have some clients who every once in a while will just get an anonymous check in the mail from a community foundation or from an investment firm, and what is this? I don't know what this is. I don't know who it's from. I can't say thank you. Well, it's a donor-advised fund, and so they can stay anonymous, and then you don't really have a good way to steward that. The final thing that's tough about donor-advised funds is that the donors can set up the DAF today and take the tax benefit today and then just let the money sit in that fund. There's really not a deadline right now. There's talk about maybe implementing that, but this is opposed to private foundations that do actually have a payout requirement. We'll talk about that in a minute. They have a payout requirement. Well, DAFs don't have that requirement, so donors can really just park their money in a DAF and not do anything with it. Another thing that should seem fairly familiar to everyone is the COVID-19, the ARPA and the CARES Act. A lot of these funds, $1.9 trillion in funding that came through these initiatives, they are expiring, and all the money has to be spent by the end of 2026. Really what that means is there's not a whole lot more grant opportunities that are being produced in response to these funding opportunities that we've had for the last 5 years or so. Meanwhile, we have other effects that were unexpected and were very sudden. And so no matter how much planning you were doing, it was really hard to plan around these because they just happened. The first one is that OBB bill that got passed in August 2025. In addition to doing a lot of other things, that bill also made it, now this is the good thing, it made it easier for small donors to give $1,000 or less. And so that's estimated to have a net gain for nonprofits of $74 billion over the next 10 years. At the same time, though, it actually lowers the incentives for large donors to give larger grants. And the estimated net loss for nonprofits is estimated to be $81 billion over the next decade. So you can tell overall, when you combine those, we're still looking at about a $5 billion loss over the next decade because of this. In addition is a lot of the economic uncertainty. So in fact, the uncertainty index, this was in May 2025, it actually hit the lowest that it had been in 125 years of data. And that's when there's economic insecurity, that causes a lot of problems, especially with grants. In particular is market volatility. Now, right now, August, September 2025, stock market has rebounded pretty much. It's doing okay. But there has been some volatility in the past year. So what happens is that foundations, a lot of times, they rely on their investments to provide funding that they can give out as grants. When they're not sure about how the market is going to perform, they may hesitate to give out a lot of grants. And I have seen this with a lot of several foundations that I regularly work with are either reducing or they're postponing these grant cycles just because they're worried about market volatility. Meanwhile, we have got the executive orders that are coming out of the White House. So since January 20th, there have been more than 50 executive orders that do impact nonprofits. And if you want to stay on top of those, literally these change on a daily basis. I like to go to the Council of Nonprofits or to Thompson Grants to kind of look, they kind of keep track of these when they're coming through, not only keeping track of the executive orders, but also the challenges in court, whether they are frozen or whether they are doing other things. So you need to just keep an eye on those. Some of the funding, as you can see, these are just some of the examples where traditional nonprofits may be losing their federal funding, like public broadcasting or public media. Now those entities are having to go to other grantors, maybe private foundations or donors, to try to fill that huge gap. And that's just creating more competition for all of us. Meanwhile, individual donors have reduced. That we've got, after decades of every year individual donations kind of going up, we're now seeing that those individual donations are going down. In addition to that, volunteer hours after COVID have never really rebounded. So volunteerism is a type of donations, and when you don't have as many volunteers as you've had in the past, you have to fill those tasks with paid workers. So that just adds more pressure to nonprofits to raise more money from fewer resources. So nonprofits are preparing for the worst. So this was a study that was recently done in Monterey County, California, where just in a one-year period, nonprofit leaders were asked, how secure do you think your current funding sources are? Mm-hmm. So in November of 2024, they were relatively sure about their funding sources. Just 6 months later, they were not sure at all. That really dropped off. So we are seeing nonprofits just preparing for the worst. Meanwhile, I think we all know that human needs seem to be rising, whether it's homelessness, healthcare, food insecurity, arts, education. Human needs are just rising. In fact, just basic human needs seem to be increasing. I went and looked on the United Nations website because, my entire life, the United States just had the best human development index. And we've always been at the top. Well, we're not at the top anymore. In fact, there are 19 countries ahead of us now. So you can tell that just in the scope of globally, the United States, our human needs are rising. And that's creating greater need and more competition for grants because nonprofits are expected to be that safety net. Meanwhile, we are seeing a lot of grant proposals written by AI. Now, I'm not going to go into a lot of details about the ins and outs of using AI in grant seeking, including the ethical concerns around using AI. Maybe that's another webinar, but I can tell you that I have heard from some foundations that give a lot of grants saying that the number of proposals that they are receiving have just skyrocketed, and that they can tell that a lot of them are AI written. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean they're good or they're bad. It just means they are AI written, and it's flooding the funders, and it's slowing down and causing a clog. So then there's you. So I want to talk about why this really sucks for grant professionals. This is, I actually had someone comment before this webinar, and when I said, what are some questions that you've got or some things you're experiencing? And you are hearing things like this. The board wants to fill the budget hole with new grants, and you need to find at least 20 new grantors this year. Guys, it's September, so a lot of you are facing pressure just to fill a budget hole this year with grants, and that's not reasonable. What other unreasonable requests are you getting? If you'll drop that in the comments, I would love to know kind of what you're hearing and what people are asking you to do. So first of all, let's all just take a deep breath. We are going to get through this. There will still be grants 5 years from now, I think. We'll all still have careers. Things just may look a little different. In the meantime, in order to get through this, we need to just prepare ourselves. But first, let's just take a deep breath, and everything is going to be okay. Now, let's talk about these 7 tips for survival. Number 1, set realistic expectations. I'm not talking about setting your own realistic expectations, because if you're a grant professional, I know you have realistic expectations. What you're going to need to do, though, is set realistic expectations for the people that you work with. Now, this is the difference between a grant writer and a grant professional. A grant writer just responds to the things that they are asked to do. A grant professional educates the people that work with them. So your coworkers, your board members, your development director or executive director, whoever is in that circle of people that you are working with, you need to educate them and help them set realistic expectations. Let's talk about how a good way to do this. Now, before I get too much further, I do want to make sure and let you know on the website, I do have a letter template that you can use that talks about what are the challenges that you're facing and what these different 7 tips. And if you want to go to the website and download that, you can do that for free, and then just change it to fit your situation for your organization, and feel free to send that out. Now, until this wave of chaos recedes, though, it is in the best interest, I think, of your nonprofit to encourage or discourage any new initiatives. It's time to just focus on those most urgent needs. Maybe launching a capital campaign for a new administrative building, maybe this just isn't the time to do that. Maybe it's time to really focus on those mission-centered, those most urgent needs that you've got. I am seeing a lot of grantors and a lot of nonprofits really looking toward collaborative grants, and I feel like funders love this. If you've got other nonprofits in your area that are serving a similar mission or are in a similar geographic area or serving a similar population, you really want to consider collaborating with them and maybe submitting a collaborative grant proposal. Now, that might mean that you get a little bit less, or that you're going to have to collaborate with another organization, but funders really love this because it gives you an opportunity to, in collaboration, you're able to leverage each other's resources, and you're able to fill all of the gaps in the community, or do a better job filling the gaps, and you get to avoid duplication of effort. And grantors love all of those things, so that's something really important to consider right now. Here's another thing you need to educate people about. I educate clients about this all the time. Grants are slow money. They have a delayed gratification. If you stop and think about the grants that your organization has right now today, I promise you this is true, it is based on the work you were doing 18 to 24 months ago. So the work that you're doing today, you might not really see the fruits of it for another 18 to 24 months. Why? Because grants are slow money. It takes a long time. I think the average grant award takes about 6 months from the time that you apply till the time that you hear back from it. So if your stakeholders are asking you to fill a budget hole by the end of the year, that's not reasonable and it's not realistic, and this is why. Grants are slow money. Number 2, pump up your stewardship. So stewardship is that process of managing the grants and donations, whatever they are, that you have right now. Make sure that you're reaching out to your funders, to your grantors. Make sure you're maintaining those relationships. In most situations, even if it's a government grantor, there are still staff members there that you can build that relationship with and manage that relationship with. And if they're used to hearing from you and seeing your name in their email and talking with you, they may be more likely to let you know when things are coming down the road that you need to be prepared for. So bump up your stewardship. You also need to, I've got some examples of kind of some easy lifts, just some good ways to make sure that you're keeping up with your stewardship. Grantors don't want to just hear from you when you are asking for money or when you're sending a report. You need to maintain that communication. So maybe a phone call from a board member or a key staffer. Maybe a handwritten thank you note. How many times do you get a handwritten thank you note these days? Sent in snail mail. That's going to get noticed. I think even better is that program participant letter, or if you work with kids, maybe a kid's drawing, something that just really helps them connect and see that the grant that they gave you is still making a difference in people's lives right now. There is an old adage in development that says if you go to somebody and ask for money, you're going to get advice. If you go to somebody and ask for advice, you might end up getting money. So focus on asking advice from different funders and different donors. Hey, here are some of the constraints that we're looking at. What kind of advice do you have for us? Or maybe even visit with them about what are their experiences? What are foundations and funders experiencing right now? That's backwards. Let's go forwards. Here you go. Number 3, improve the quality of your grant seeking. You need to make sure that you're appealing to the right grantors. Research their 990, look at their website, talk to them, obviously, go to the right grantors. Make sure you're telling your organization's story succinctly, but in a way that's compelling and includes maybe some pulling on their heartstrings, as well as providing objective data. Show how valuable your work is and how the world is just going to be a worse place if you're not there doing it. And I'm always going to add this, make sure you follow the directions for the funder. Now, I'm also going to recommend another really excellent thing to do to survive the next however long this is going to take, is to make sure your house is in order. I honestly think that some nonprofits that are just kind of been floating along by the seat of their pants and they're not using best practices, I'm afraid that they may not make it through the next few years. You need to make sure that you're not one of those. You need to adopt best practices, make sure that you are updating your organizational information, and that you really do understand what it is that your organization is doing. And make sure that your 990 is in great shape. Make sure your website is in really good shape, because funders are going to look at those things. If you're not sure what the best practices are that you need to be paying attention to, I would encourage you to go just Google Standards for Excellence. If you have a Center for Nonprofits in your state, they may coordinate this program in your state. It's a fantastic program that your board and leadership can go through that just helps them up their game and be a better nonprofit. So I do highly recommend that. Number 4, improve the quantity of your grants. I love looking at the State of Grant Seeking report that comes out every year, and in the 2025 edition of that, they did show some data that showed of nonprofits that submitted 20 proposals, 98% of them got at least one proposal. So there is, it is a quantity, it's a numbers game. The more you put out there, the more likely it is that you're going to get a grant. Hopefully more than one. There's a huge warning that I want to give you associated with increasing the quantity of your grants. Do not take this as me advocating for you to just blanket every funder in your area, in the country. You know, Bill Gates is not going to give you a grant just because you start flooding him with applications. You need to be strategic about the increase that you're doing. Just target the foundations or the grantors who are interested, who would be interested in you and your mission. The worst thing you can do for your reputation is just take a shotgun approach and send out applications everywhere. Number 5, diversify your funding pie. Now, this isn't necessarily about grants. We just need to remember that grants, I think across the country, it's about 17% of the funding pie for nonprofits is grants. So it's not going to be 100% of your budget. You've got to look for some other sources, and it's got to be well balanced for your organization. So how do you communicate this and what the funding pie should look like for your organization? Well, you could go and look at the 990s for other organizations that are similar to yours and see where their funding comes from. And then you can compare yourself to your peers, and that might give you a better target. Now, the reason I say this is that might be different. Obviously, as a grant professional, you're not going to be in charge of program services fees for your that piece of the revenue pie. But again, this helps you educate up and educate around to just be aware of these funding sources and what they need to look like. Number 6, and this is actually kind of tied to increasing the quantity of the grant proposals that you send out. You do need to cultivate new relationships with potential funders, potential grantors. Fundraising is all about relationships. It's another adage in the fundraising world, and grants are a form of fundraising. Now, if you're like me, you're an introvert, you really don't want to be away from your desk, and there's nothing better than just sitting and typing grant applications all day. But if you are responsible for grants, there may be an element of having to do some of this development that we're not always comfortable with. There are some things you can do, though. Never send out a cold application to a funder unless they absolutely refuse to talk to you, and some of them do refuse to talk to you. But unless they refuse to talk to you, make sure you warm them up. Have a conversation with them. But I would even say don't cold call them. Warm them up, and there are some ways to do this. One that I like to recommend is a lot of funders do have social media accounts. Go ahead and follow them on social media, but don't just follow them. Comment on the posts that they make, maybe repost what they have. They will probably notice that you're doing that, and it will start making your name and your organization a bit more familiar. Attend local events, or if you are attending local events where funders are there, take a deep breath. I promise it'll be okay. Go up and introduce yourself. This is part of your job, is to advocate for your organization. Part of their job as grantors and as staff on foundations is to be aware of what's going on in their community and potential grantees that they can support. So you're helping them do their job when you introduce yourself and you tell them about your organization. You might want to practice this. I know I get nervous when I just have to walk up and start talking to someone. So I do kind of like to practice what I'm going to say, and that's something that you may want to do as well. Make sure you reach out to foundation staff way ahead of time. Don't call them 2 days before the deadline and then ask them a lot of questions. Start really, really early. In terms of those DAFs that we talked about earlier, you may want to make sure you build good relationships with the people on staff at your community foundation if they maintain DAFs, because they may be able to connect you with some of those mysterious phantom donors that have DAFs. Number 7, this is the top one for me because of Grant Holster. But regardless of the system that you're using, you do need to organize your grant seeking, and that doesn't just mean your deadlines and your tasks. It's also the information and documents. That 250 word history of the organization. You need to have someplace where you can keep that and get your hands on it. The most recent 990, the financial statements. You need to have a really good system for keeping track of all of that. You also need a way to track funder information, including what has the relationship been with that funder over the years. What have been the previous grants that you've had with that funder? You need to have all of that linked and at your fingertips. Of course, Grant Holster is my favorite way of doing that, but I don't want you to sit here and think that this is just a crummy commercial. But in a way it is. Hopefully not too crummy a commercial, but I did want to remind you about using that code Drought to get 20% off here until September the 15th. Okay, so let's recap what we talked about in this webinar. Nonprofits are outgrowing grantors. DAFs are increasing and they're hard to access, they're hard to research. ARPA funds are going away. New laws are affecting donors. There's economic uncertainty. Stock market volatility has been really up and down. Executive orders are making things tough. Individual giving and volunteerism is down. Human needs are increasing, and AI proposals are flooding grantors. So overall, it kind of sucks right now, and we can all commiserate with that. I'm seeing a lot of nods. It definitely does, but there is hope. So manage expectations. Absolutely manage your own expectations and be gentle with yourself. But you really need to educate and manage the expectations of the people that you're working with. Focus on stewardship, improve the quality of your grants and the quality of your organization, increase your quantity of grant proposals you're doing, diversify your funding, cultivate future grantors, and get organized. Of course, I put taking care of yourself as a bonus. I think I would also put that under managing expectations. You cannot write grants, you cannot represent your organization well if you're not taking care of yourself. So make sure that you are doing that. Now, I do have an evaluation that is linked to this. I would love to hear back from you. And if you can just let me know what you thought about this webinar and maybe any other topics that you would like to see webinars done on. I would love to hear from you. And I am more than happy to share the slide deck. Make sure I can send you that letter template, and I can send you a certificate of completion if you need that. All right, well, we are going to take any questions that you've got. For those of you that are watching a recording of this, I'm going to stop this here because hopefully below you will see some of the questions, and you'll have an opportunity. Let me switch that back to myself. You can go below, put any questions in there, and I'll be checking those comments, and I will answer the questions that you've got. Or you can reach out to me. I'm Dana@grantholster.com. It's really easy to remember. And thank you so much for being here. Best of luck to you. Remember, you do make the world a better place. Thanks for all you do.